Today I'm going to be musing on what I think are some foundational lessons every mom should embrace. And these are in no particular order. So I'm going to just jump right in. The first is very basic because it's a very basic thing that we ought to do, which is finding joy in the ordinary. And I think this is really basic and simple. And yet I find that sometimes it is just very hard to do. It's hard for a lot of us moms to get into that. But as being the heart of our homes, our joy, our disposition towards our daily tasks and life, and just going about our day makes a huge, huge impact on the atmosphere of our homes and cultivating in our children the dispositions they have towards the things that they're even doing. So, for example, I'm somebody who hums a lot, like I hum a lot to myself as I go about doing stuff. And I never really thought much about it until I noticed my children starting to do it, where, they're building Legos or eating food, like very ordinary, basic things. And they're singing to themselves and they're having this kind of joyful spirit while they're doing that. And it just really affirmed and encouraged me to continue having that disposition because the reality is in our day, we do a lot of the same things over and over and over again. We Especially with little children, you're changing diapers, nursing, doing laundry, cooking. It's very repetitive. It's often in some ways not very exciting and then when there's a lot going on, sometimes it is cumbersome. But I think we're really called to find joy in all of those different parts of life. And it's kind of crazy how and it's not just in your home though, but it's kind of crazy how like when you go outside your home and you're waiting in line at the store or waiting for an appointment in a waiting room or something like that. Like you look around you and the dispositions on most people's faces are pretty unhappy seeming or grumpy. And just having a joyful disposition really stands out to people. Not that we should be doing it to make a scene or make people notice us, but it's such a gift to other people also to exude joy. And as a Catholic, if the joy of the Lord is within you, that should be manifested in you as you go about your day. If that's truly something that is within your heart and you believe that God has blessed you, I mean, how could you not go about your day in that manner? On just a very basic level, there have just been so many times of when I've been out and or in drive-through or at the store or something like that, and just talking to people in a joyful tone, you can just tell that they're not that they're not receiving that on a regular basis, and when they do, it makes such a big difference to them. I had this encounter when I was at Walmart. I was looking for something, and I was talking to this worker, and I was looking for a product, and she said that they didn't have any, um, and that was it, and we joked back and forth about the product. I can't even remember the exact conversation, not that it matters, and then we both kinda went our separate ways. Anyways, I went and completed my shopping, I'm checking out, and this woman comes to me while I'm checking out with a big box of the product that I was looking for. And she said to me that she was getting off from her shift. So first of all, she was getting off her shift. Like she was free to go and she was getting off her shift and a truck came in with new inventory and she thought to herself, "Oh, that product that I was looking for might be in there." So she said she went into the truck to look for it for me and she goes, "Yeah, lo and behold, I found all of this, I found it for you, and yeah, how many do you want?" And she didn't have to do that, and not only did she was about to get off of work, she looked for me in Walmart, so it's not a small place, and the last time we saw each other, like, there would have been no really point of reference as to where I would be next. She didn't know at what point or where I was in my grocery shopping. Like, I could have been gone by the time that she came and found me. But she made the effort to find me, and that was just such a beautiful gift, and I thought a manifestation of just the gift that it brings people when you're joyful, and it's worth it. It's always worth it, not just because you get the product you're looking for at Walmart. because of just the gift that it is to other people and how they can encounter Christ through you. And don't you want to do that? So, that's just like a basic thing, but a basic thing that I think goes a long way, because the disposition we have on a daily basis, on a regular, consistent daily basis, sets sets the tone of our homes, and is just an example to our children of the disposition that they ought to have towards life and what they're doing, and that will go beyond the home once they're out of it. So I think that is something really basic and simple, that we could be doing, and I think that we could all, improve in doing more. So, okay, next one. Just the realization and the embracing of that your time not being your own anymore. Before you get married, obviously, before you have children, time is very flexible. You can kind of do things when you want to do them. There's not oh there's not a high demand on your time or things to be getting done at a certain time. But then when you start having children and when you get married, that a lot of that changes. And I think we should kind of embrace the newfound challenge of excuse me, having to discipline ourselves with our time, give of our time in a generous manner, and give of it in a way that isn't that is joyful and that you're kind of like, hey, I'm here for you. Now, obviously, those comes with caveats. Of course, like, we have to be also mindful of our own needs and stuff like that too. But I'm not really speaking to that. I'm just really speaking to just the notion that when you, as a mom, time is a very limited resource, and it's something you need to learn to be okay with being interrupted. Learn to utilize it well, and learn to give of it in a selfless manner. Like those are just basic things that we have to cultivate in regards to our time as moms. The next thing is being okay with chaos and navigating it well. So th- I have 4 boys, 4 and under, and so yeah, there's a lot of moments in my day where people are yelling all at once or fighting, or the baby's crying, the toddler wants this thing, and then my 2 older children are fighting each other with swords, and there's just a lot of noise going on around. And sometimes, and yeah, often it can be overwhelming. And if I'm especially in the middle of trying to get food on the table, or if there's like a time crunch, it's really easy to lose your peace and to kind of freak out and get irritated and get mad at everybody around you. And that's obviously a really easy temptation to fall into, is getting irritated and having an irritable disposition towards the people around you. But chaos is going to be chaos is inevitable, when it comes to family life. When it comes to life in general, chaos is inevitable. And learning how to just pause, to take a deep breath. If you got to exit the if you have to exit the room and close the bathroom door, for a minute and just kind of refocus yourself, say a prayer to our Lord, and then keep going, do that. But just like being intentional, not letting yourself get whisked away in the chaos of things, and being able to like own that and realize like, hey, I'm the person here who's supposed to be facilitating peace and order in this home. And I'm not going to let the chaos um like triumph over me. So, and I think that's a good thing to practice in general, like just practicing a level of resilience, lengthening your bandwidth, and yeah, navigating moments of chaos peacefully, in a controlled manner. Um, and that might even mean like that might even mean like announcing, because I do this a lot for myself. It's just like announcing to everyone, okay, there's a lot going on right now, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm going to step out for a second. Or I need everybody to be quiet for the next minute and not talk to me for the next minute so I can just kind of collect myself. Or no, I don't know, something like that. But just like setting a boundary sometimes is helpful, especially to your kids when they're not necessarily yeah, oftentimes chaos is not being done, at least for me. My kids aren't intentionally trying to create chaos. They're just being themselves and the natural product of that is chaos. And so sometimes announcing that to my children and making them aware of kind of where mommy's at is helpful for them. Not that they completely understand it, but, you know, they're being given a heads up, instead of just getting blown off the head all of a sudden, they realize, "Okay, there's something going on." Okay, the next lesson or thing that moms, I think, need to embrace, or we need to embrace, is accepting, embracing, and enjoying hard work. So I think a lot of times in motherhood, um, the perceive it's the work that we have to do, and the work that has to be done, the responsibilities we have feel hard, and we kind of crumble underneath the weight of it all. And I think there's just something to really pray and discern about, because something being hard doesn't make it bad. I think that's a really good thing to remind yourself of. Like, just because something is hard doesn't mean it's not for you, or doesn't mean that you can't overcome that. Um, I think we can all have different perspectives as to hard what we're gonna do when we're put in hard situations or seasons where things are difficult and hard. And you always have the choice. You always have the choice to overcome. You always have the choice to improve in a certain area. You have the freedom to succumb to your weaknesses and let yourself be overwhelmed uh, and unable to kind of like handle the hard things around you. Or you can also choose and work on triumphing over those things, or being triumphant over those things. And I think in our society today, especially when it comes to motherhood, um, yeah, when it comes to motherhood, is just I think there is just a general disposition that it's okay to be mediocre, and it's okay for you to have a hard time and struggle, and that hard time to struggle, and you don't necessarily need to improve. Like, I'm not saying that that is a message that people, or I'm not saying that's a message that is being espoused, but I do think that sometimes is like the general, um, I don't know, I guess, like, disposition or attitude towards motherhood being hard. It's like, "Oh, everybody experiences it being hard," and we'll just leave it at that, like, that's not it's not a it's not information that you're receiving to help inform you on how you ought to improve or grow or change or sacrifice. It's just, "Oh, it's hard," and yeah, like, let's just accept that and be okay with that. And I mean, that that's not just a notion that we apply to motherhood. That's often a notion we just kind of apply to ourselves in general. Like, we're just okay with being mediocre. We're okay with being mediocre people. We're okay with being mediocre mothers, and we're not willing to do the things or make the changes that will help us to become better mothers. That will help us to not just survive, but to thrive, and to live each day in our vocations with great purpose and meaning and drive, and like a tenacity, like, and a zeal. I think very often we're told that like, we're just comforted. We're comforted in our weaknesses. We're comforted in our lacking. And I think there's obviously a place there. Obviously, we all need mercy. We all need grace. I'm not saying that, but just that I think sometimes we can do more. I think we can always do more. Everybody can always do more in their lives and to improve. But I do think that's an area that sometimes there's a temptation to just kind of be mediocre in, but like, to not embrace the hard things that God has for you. And again, that's not a motherhood thing. It's a life thing. Like, we just want to refuse suffering or refuse the hard things. And we don't want to let those hard things change us or mold us or show us how God wants us to make us even greater, even better. The next thing is what can I like this point, or I like this musing, is just that you're doing something special, but you aren't that special. Which to that I mean that being a mother, the vocation of motherhood, in which you're called stewarding the minds and forming these souls that have been gifted to you by God, is extremely special. Don't get me wrong, it is extremely special. It is an extreme blessing and a gift that should not be taken for granted. And yet, it's it's easy to kind of like almost like over dramatize it in our minds that, oh, like we're the only ones who go through this and we're the only ones who kind of, suffer the highs and lows of family life and children and raising children and all of that stuff. And and I think ultimately I'm saying what you're doing is special, but don't let the moments where it feels hard or yeah, because it is hard. Like, you know, laying your laying your life down for others should feel arduous. Like, it should feel like a labor of love, a labor of something, but labor implies that it's going to be hard work, that there's going to be stretching and, challenging, and it's gonna be challenging. Anyways, but to not have self-pity, to kind of look at, what you do in a day in your life and think, "Oh, woe is me," or, you're the only one who has to kinda, yeah, lay themselves down or do the same thing over and over again. Um, or that, "Oh, like, look at me, like, I'm a mom of many, and I just do all of those things," and, like, having kind of, like, even a pride in that sometimes too, where it's like, "Oh, I'm a mom and I do so much, and my life is so hard, and I make so many sacrifices," and you can just kind of, like, just be so self-centered and self-focused sometimes on that what you're doing, which just yeah, just kinda leads you to think like, "Oh, I'm special, like, I deserve special treatment even sometimes," to not have to do the hard things or to have yeah, like, to take pity on you, and I think sometimes we can just kinda go too far with that, where we pity ourselves too much, and I think I was reading a book, 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, and that's actually the first one, is that mentally strong people don't pity themselves. And I think as mothers, especially because of how much we give, very often what we're demanded to give, it can often just lead to, yeah, self-pity and thinking, "Oh, like, it's just woe is me and all the sacrifices you make and all the ungratitude I receive," which it is might be there, like, and I'm not saying it's a not, and I'm not saying that, we do get the things or the thoughtfulness from others that we ought to, but just not to focus too much on that. So, okay, next. Final thoughts are these. Nothing worth building is easy. I mean, that's really basic, but I think sometimes when it comes to marriage and family life, that notion sometimes is kind of lost to us as women, especially in our world today where there's such a lack of valuing of family life and in marriage. And so, I think when women are pursuing other kind of dreams or even not necessarily women in particular, but just businesses in general, like we kind of understand the concept of, if you were a business owner trying to create something awesome and like an awesome empire, um, they it would make sense to you. It would seem very reasonable if they were to say, "Oh yeah, like, it took a lot of energy. It's doing a lot of the little menial stuff that really that really moves the needle. It takes so much intentionality and investment and time, and it's hard work to create something awesome." And I think we would find that a very reasonable thing to say, I think, and that makes sense to us. But then yet, oftentimes when it comes to investing that same kind of notion into our families, into our marriage, seems unreasonable, unrealistic, and overwhelming. And I think that's just a really sad thing because I think a lot of us don't take on this sort of zeal and mission that should come along with entering into marriage and family life. My husband and I often like to say that we're in the business of family, and and just like that's what we're here for. Like that's what we're investing our life in, and realizing that our children and what we're creating and building together is the greatest return on investment that we'll have in this life on anything that we do here is our family, is the mark that we leave on our children, is what we're giving them, the marriage and the example that we set for them. And that I honestly believe, like, that we should value that so much more than it seems like we do. Oftentimes, when I talk to other moms or just, other mothers or people I just, see, like, you can tell that they're just kinda letting marriage and family life happen to them. And even faithful Catholics are like that too. I think, it's a very we like to think about all the kind of like lofty theological and philosophical things, and those things are worthy to contemplate and invest in and spend our time in. And yet when it comes to our marriages and raising our families and the vision we have for our families, we spend such little time investing in that and growing that and making that a place where we're pouring our whole selves into. I think sometimes, especially with just, um, just like kind of the casualness of even getting married, like there's not a, it's like, there's often a lot of young people who like don't feel the need to get married right away. Or even when they get married, they kind of want to live like single people for, for whatever amount of time. And there really is this lack of sense of urgency to like take on the mission, um, which obviously implies that there isn't a realization that there's a mission there, that there is not something great and important that you ought to be doing. Um, and I think it's just because the reality of how secondary are the pursuing of the pursuing of the greatness in our families for our families, has become so lost. And I think that's just something that people ought to like really pray about and think about, because when we look at our lives, when we look at what we're spending our time in, Um, I think just naturally we often just waste a lot of our time. We waste a lot of our time with things that don't matter, and we invest in a lot of things that don't matter, that aren't gonna move the needle, that aren't, really that aren't really gonna be bearing good fruit for our lives anyway, if we were gonna be honest. And I think that a lot of that has to do with just our inability to endure suffering very often, um, the refusal of accepting hard things, and like, living into like, I guess sometimes I guess I just think, to myself, like, "Mm, like, how could I as a woman of faith, how could I as a Catholic woman who, like, is pursuing who truly wants to pursue sainthood and God has put me in this vocation, how could I not pursue that in what I'm doing?" So, and I think that just sometimes has to do with sometimes, like, we like to segregate parts of our life, like God's kind of that, we accept God and we want to live virtuously in like one area of our life, but then that doesn't seep um, into all areas of our life, unfortunately. Anyways, but I do think it's a good thing that if your head hits the pillow at the end of the day because you're exhausted from living an intentional and meaningful day and life, and you've been going at it all day, and you're exhausted at the end of the day from that, that's a good life. That's a good life. That's a life being lived well, and I think that's a very worthy pursuit. So that's all for my musings today, and see you next time.